for the second. India have won the test match. India have won the series.
They're going to get back for two. India home. Lords goes wild.
Hello and welcome to a new episode of the 81 All Out podcast. This is Siddhartha Vaidyanathan at Sidvi on Twitter. And I'm joined as usual today by my co-host, Mahesh, who is at Cornered on Twitter. Hi, Mahesh. How are you?
Hey, Sid. Good to be back.
Yeah, great to have you. And just before we start, a quick reminder. A couple of weeks ago, we republished Mike Coward's Cricket Beyond the Bazaar. As many of you know that we republished Mike Marquesse's book, War Minus the Shooting, late last year. And now we republished our second book, Cricket Beyond the Bazaar. I'll put the links to it everywhere. Please pick it up. It's a really landmark book that was written in 1990 when Australia's relationship with India on the cricketing field was totally different than it is now. I mean, these days we're talking about India and Australia potentially playing 5 test series, and I think they've announced also 5 test series and things like that. But back then, they did play a 5 test series in 92, I must mention. But the relationship was far different in the 70s and 80s, and there were long stretches when Australia didn't even play. So anyway, Mike Coward has looked deeply into the history of the relationship and writes beautifully about several matches from the 80s, especially the tight test. So pick up the book. I'll put links to it. Anyway, getting back, we're delighted to welcome today, veteran, if I may say, of the cricket broadcasting industry, Hemant Buch. Thank you so much, Hemant, for joining us. It's a great delight to have you here.
Thank you, Sid. Thank you, Mahesh. Good to be here. Good to be chatting with you guys.
Thank you so much. Hemant has worked in the broadcasting industry for over 25 years. He's been, a producer, broadcast director, and he is, responsible for several of the images that you see on your screen, the videos, the footages that you see on your screen, the quality of coverage. And I was, quite blown away, especially recently. I've been watching a lot of cricket from Sri Lanka, Australia's tour to Sri Lanka, Pakistan's tour to Sri Lanka, and Hemant was there. And absolutely fabulous job, Hemant. I mean, I thoroughly enjoyed watching the series, whether it's live or highlights or the packages that came forth. It was a joy. And I guess going by your tweets and everything, you probably had a fantastic time covering that as well.
Yes, it was. Thank you so much for all that praise. It's good. It's good to know, because that's what we work for. We work really hard. We don't have all the tools that a lot of the big sort of broadcasters have, a lot of the big boards have. So we've got to make the best of what we have. And luckily, we have a few like-minded people and some people who work really hard. And once you're on the same page, once you have a crew that gels, then you can do wonders. So yeah, that's one of my mantras, to put together at least the main people who are on the same wavelength and those who really care for what they do. Because eventually I would go back and watch, all the highlights, everything that I could lay my eyes on to see how we did. Because I take great pride in my work and I like people with me who take great pride in the work as well.
Yeah, tell us a bit. I mean, we will get to these series soon, but tell us, if we can rewind a bit, tell us a bit about your, how you got into cricket and the broadcasting business. You said it was sometime in the early to mid 90s. So can you take us back and how it all started?
Yeah, I often relate the story, and it's what I call the path of least resistance, because all my life I only played sport. I played badminton, I played table tennis, I played for the university. I won, the All India Inter-University Gold in both sports. So it was something that, that was my life. My parents met on the badminton court, so they used to play. My earliest memories are of the badminton court, and all throughout my life I just played, and I didn't know what I was going to do. I went to college and I played there as well. Very few classes, lots of sport. And then I didn't know what to do. So I said I'll just do my MA, and I played more sport. Never did any classes. I did 3 classes in 2 years. did my MA in history, finished that, and then I didn't know what I was going to do. I worked in a bank for one day. I realized I had to wear a tie, so I never went back the second day.
For one
And
day, you said, okay.
one day, next day, I didn't go back. Then I did a course in IIT on entrepreneurship, but I mean, I knew nothing about entrepreneurship. And suddenly I'd given in a few articles I'd never written in my life before, but I thought maybe sports journalism was a way out. So I'd just written a couple of pieces, one on Vijay Dahiya, because he was a junior from college, and
wicketkeeper,
one on my badminton partner Anil Mohan, who was a national junior badminton champion. So I'd written those pieces and given them in to V. Krishnaswamy of the Pioneer. And 2-3 months later, I got a call from him saying, there's a vacancy. Would you like to join? I said, when? He said, tomorrow. And and I joined the Pioneer. And the first job was to write, was to do some year enders, because it was actually the end of '93, about the 24th of December, and Michael Jordan had just retired. So he said, okay, it's a year ender. I want you to write me about 200 words or 150 words on Michael Jordan. And I was a big Jordan fan. So I went back. I didn't know how to type. I wrote everything down in a notebook and came back the next day. And he said, okay, just input it. And I would, painfully typing. I kept on typing, and this guy kept abusing me. So what are you doing? Why is this not ready? I said, I'm still typing. So how slow can you be? Eventually, I wrote the piece and sent it to him. He looked at it and he said, are you mad? And I said, what happened? He said, this is 1,043 words. I told you to write 150. So I said, I'm going to sub it and cut it down, and then you'll see. I said, okay. About half an hour later, he called me, and then I said, okay, now you can read the piece back. And I did a word check, and I said, no, it's 1,053. He said, yes, you had forgotten some ers and thus. And so it was 1,053 words, my first piece in the Pioneer. That was how I joined, basically got into sports journalism. And at that time, I think I was earning 1,700 rupees. The aim was to get to 10,000 rupees in 10 years' time. But then, television started coming along, and suddenly I got an offer from NDTV and also from BITV or TVI, which was just starting out. And I, in my wisdom, I thought that since NDTV was just a production house and TVI was a channel, I should join TVI. I joined TVI. It wasn't a huge mistake eventually, but it shut shop very quickly. It was in the same building as TWI. So TWI was one floor higher, and suddenly I got a call from a friend of mine who was working there, and he said, "Would you like to join us?" I said, "Yeah, of course." And I went up one floor, did an interview with Peter Hutton, and he asked me to join. And that's when the journey began, and that's how I got into sports journalism, accident, and the path of least resistance, as I said.
Lovely story. Had I not been here, Hemant, I guess this would have quickly turned into a badminton podcast, because Mahesh is a huge badminton fan, and both of you would have just continued talking badminton, and I would have basically just gone away. But this is a cricket podcast, so we will stick to that. It's wonderful that you talk about your experience as a sports person, and before, and all the sports that you played, and how sports basically took priority over even college and other things. So how has that helped you as a person in broadcasting, in TV? You obviously understand the rhythm of sport, the requirements of a sports person, the challenges, and you will definitely be empathizing with so many people who are struggling on the field on the day, because obviously you know what it is to play and things. So how important is it, and how valuable has it been for you to understand what playing sport means in this field?
Yeah, I mean, again, I considered myself a very good player when I started, but now I realize that it's, until you've played internationally, people don't consider you to be any good. But I wrote a piece on killer instinct, and I talked about Jimmy Connors, and what killer instinct was, and I remember the piece, and my editor and deputy sports editor sat me down and said, "You can't write this piece." I said, "Why not? I played it, and I know what is wrong with the piece." And they could find nothing wrong with it, so it did go on. So yeah, playing sport did help. There is a lot of empathy, of course, involved with that. Of course, even cricketers don't necessarily have that empathy. Ex-cricketers sort of go after their own ilk later on in life when they're finished. It happens largely in countries like Pakistan. It happens less in India these days because people either are more evolved or they're more worried about rubbing somebody the wrong way or whatever it is. But yeah, there are jealousies. There's a lot of things that goes on behind the scenes. But for me, since I'm an insider and an outsider at the same time, I sort of find it a lot easier. I also make it a point not to get too close to any of the cricketers, because then that colors your vision of things. I might pose for a photo with, say, Viv Richards or recently Steve Smith, because I consider them to be global superstars, and it's a memory to show my child or her child eventually. But that's about it. I don't want to go out and grab their time, because again, I don't think it's sort of what I do. I just find that having played sport, you understand sport a lot better. You look at things a lot more differently, and having played sport at a high level, it colors, even if it's a different sport. When I go onto a telecast, I think, or I would like to believe that I look at it differently from others. It may be right, it may be wrong, but that's what I aim to do.
Yeah, what struck me was when you were talking about your first few forays into journalism was that you did it was in the 90s. So you did not write a piece on a superstar. You wrote a piece on Vijay Daya, who was of course you from your college days who you knew, but even then this was it struck me because there are some people want to write about the big players, but you chose to go with writing about a player who was probably not as well known. So that's why I asked the question also. Yeah.
He was not even in the national side then. He was in the Ranji Trophy team. And again, when I joined the Pioneer as well, both V. Krishnaswamy and G. Rajaraman, who were the two main people, they would emphasize on covering local cricket or local sport. I did a lot of hockey. I did a lot of badminton, local sport, before thinking of the big things. So yeah, it's important. These days, people immediately talk about the English Premier League, but they don't know much about, for example, the Durand Cup or any of the local tournaments. So that's it's important to know your base and then move on. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with following international leagues, but it's good to at least live in your country, know about your country, and then of course look at the superstars. So there is a lot of it's easier to have knowledge of international sports because you see a lot more of it. If you're a real student, then you need to know about the smaller players, the people who are going to make it big, following under 19 cricketers or under 19 hockey players or badminton players, so that when they make it big, you already know a lot about them rather than sort of trying to get educated about them.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the best time to also talk to many players is when they're much younger, because they want people to come and give them that exposure. They want that publicity. They want the media limelight. And once you speak to them at that age, then after that they remember. I mean, at least the good ones remember you, and they make sure that they are always respectful of your time. I mean, honestly, I can even pick a name like VVS Lakshman, for instance. He's probably the best in this regard. I mean, there is no journalist request that he will sort of refuse. Of course, he will say that I'm busy and we'll do it later, but he will make sure that it is done, because he's one person who genuinely appreciates what the media has done in his career when he was younger, and he wants to give back. I mean, there are not that many like that, but you really appreciate those who are.
Talking about VVS Lakshman, yes, I did that Irani Trophy game that where he came to prominence. And yeah, I share a great relationship with him. When he got into the Indian team and there was this camp, he insisted that I come into the dressing room and have breakfast with them, because I was there since morning and I was shooting. I was very reluctant, because I didn't want to go into a dressing room full of superstars. There's Sachin, there's Kumble, there's everybody, and I sit and eat idli and dosa and omelets or whatever. But he insisted, and yeah, I mean, I remember that Rahul Dravid always used to call me. If they're playing football, he would say, come in and play. And yeah, I mean, Sachin. I mean, he was nice enough. He would if he was playing table tennis, he would call me. All of these guys. I think it was a lot easier then, because I guess the media was not that crazy. There were not as many media people around, and slowly you saw that evolution into the developed sort of media world, where there was a real crush for spaces. There was so much demand on their time. So now you can understand why people are a little wary. But when you get to know them, they're generally fine. People like Dhoni, or people like Sehwag, they would all be very good. Again, I don't do too many India games now, because ever since I moved to 10 Sports in Dubai, we didn't have an India board event for a long time. I mean, we just did about 2 or 3 series in India. Other than that, it was mostly Pakistan, Sri Lanka, and UAE, a little bit of the West Indies eventually, and Zimbabwe. So these were the boards that we did more of, and I have great ties with Pakistani players, for example, because they're a lot like us, but a lot more simple and a lot nicer in a lot of ways as well. So yeah, a lot more welcoming, because perhaps they like more sympathetic people. The way the media gets after them, I think they always like people who are not going to go after them, perhaps. So they're a lot less wary around people for some reason.
Yeah. So now that we've come to this 10 sports and everything, can you, for our benefit and for the listeners' benefit as well, tell us the nature of your job? Because, we don't often get to know what happens behind the scenes. So just like a sort of a brief intro into exactly what you have been doing in the last few series and your role.
Okay, so when I joined 10 Sports, I was eventually senior vice president of production, where I was looking after all sports, that all of the product that was going on screen on our channels. So that was where I was. Eventually, Sony bought over 10 Sports, and we decided to go different ways. And now I am basically what you might call a gun for hire. So I work as a broadcast director largely around the world. I used to do a lot of test matches when I was with 10 Sports. Now I largely do T20 leagues, which is the nature of the beast these days. And yeah, I direct sport, which is basically what they call calling the shots. So I have a lot of screens in front of me, which has a lot of inputs, all the cameras, all the EVS, which is the replay machines, the graphics, Hawkeye, commentary, everything is in front of me, and I curate it as live for you guys to enjoy back at home. So everything is in front of me, and I decide which are the best shots, which are the best angles, and what is the product that will come to you on the screen, and it is done instantly. So sometimes there are errors, there are mistakes, but usually, I find people asking me whether it's all automated, because there are such few mistakes that you see on a broadcast.
You explained what directing is. So how does it differ from producing, for instance? You also mentioned that you've been a producer in the past, or even now you do once in a while. And how does an executive producer differ from both of these two?
So, okay, let's start with an executive producer. An executive producer is the overall in charge of the look and feel. So while the executive producer does not do anything hands-on, he will have a look and have a word if he feels something is going wrong. He or she feels that something is going wrong. They would go and have a word to somebody. But eventually, they would go back and perhaps look at what happened in the game, and if something has gone wrong, they would have a word and tell people where they might change things. A producer is a person who will create a roster for commentary, and basically talk to the commentators, prep the commentators, and work with creating say stories to tell. But the director is largely the most important person on the broadcast, because everything goes through the director, and a lot of times the director does multiple jobs. A lot of times there isn't time to go through the producer for a lot of things. So things just go through the director. In a T20 game, it is very difficult for the producer to set up everything. Everything needs to go immediately, because if you're trying to set something up, there is a six the next ball, and it's done. So you can't tell that story. Everything needs to be very quick. Everything needs to be set up properly, and you just tell the story. So a director eventually. And it depends from director to director and from producer to producer, which is why I mentioned at the top that a synergy is very important. The producer needs to know his director rather than the other way around. The producer needs to know his director, so that if the director is taking charge in some places, the producer needs to step back and work to add to what the director is doing. In case the director is missing something, the producer adds to it. He also makes sure that the commentators know what's coming up. The producer works with the analysis producer and with the graphics producer as well to set up, say, if there's a graphic coming up about, say, the highest run scorers in this in the previous World Cup. He knows that the commentators, he tells the commentators what is coming up. He tells the director that this is a graphic which is ready, and to take it whenever he finds place for it. So the graphic is ready, the commentators know about it, the directors know about it, then the director takes it, and then he decides how long he wants to take it for, how long the story needs to go on. If there is a 6, you play that 6, and whether you want to go back to the graphic or not, it's a call that either the producer or the director takes. And again, sometimes it's a little difficult, between commentators. If there isn't chemistry, you can feel the tension. It's the same if it's between a director and a producer. If they're not in sync, you might find that things don't go exactly to plan. But generally, most of the people who work in this field know each other really well, and yeah, you find that things work like clockwork.
Yeah, and it is in the best interest, I guess, of the producer and director to have that relationship, because that will enhance the broadcast, right? I mean, if not, then it's only impairing the broadcast.
Absolutely.
You're giving me a smile. So
no, I'm giving you a smile because it is, people don't always do what is in the best interests.
That's true. Yeah.
So that can sometimes happen, but it is very, very rare. I mean, I've only had it on one occasion, on one very famous occasion, and yeah, it was sorted out very quickly. But yeah, I mean, it happens, and it is something that you need to be prepared for. So when I produce, I produce like I would, when I would like it as a director. So I let the director take the lead in most cases, and I make sure that what I need goes on air and the director knows about it. If he's not playing ball, then I push it. Otherwise, I let the director make his own pace. Sometimes, some directors are quicker than others, and they can take cues much quicker. Some are slower. When I'm directing, I like to take charge, and I like the producer to help me. So that's how I work. It's not the same for everybody. It works differently in different places, and yeah, I mean that is why knowing your producer, knowing your director is very, very important as well.
Yeah, great to hear. I just want to mention to listeners that a few months back we had done a podcast with Ajesh Ramachandran, who is the executive producer at the ICC and their broadcast and content lead, and we had covered some kind of ground over all these roles as well. So please listen to that too. That is a great compliment for this podcast. So just wanted to mention that here. But yeah, Mahesh, go ahead.
No, as he was explaining, a part of me was thinking that it's almost like playing God, right? If you're the director of a cricket broadcast, I mean any broadcast, but as cricket fans, I can see this more clearly. That particularly as someone who grew up watching cricket, you must have gone to the ground, you must have watched it from different angles. There's a certain understanding that you have of where to watch what from and so on. And all of a sudden, you get to decide for this vast majority of fans who are watching it. So every angle is kind of determined by you, right? Like for instance, my son was watching the second test the other day, and he picked up Yasir Shah's googly like from the live telecast, not even from the replay, from the real-time sort of video. I was thinking, I didn't grow up watching such quality video where I could pick up, even Kumble's googly, which was reasonably obvious from real-time sort of video. So, in some ways, you're playing God, isn't it?
Yes, there is that, of course, and which is why I actually enjoy it. I love that. Now I can't watch cricket any other way. I tried watching cricket at the ground, and I can't. I can only watch it properly in a control room where I've got 20 different angles, and I get to see everything, whatever is happening, and I then decide which is the best one, what goes on air, at what time. So yeah, it's there is that. I have very, very strong views on what angles need to go when. Like for example, if somebody's bowled and the first angle is from mid wicket, I just shake my head and I go, that's not good. Or even if it is from reverse slip or from a slips angle, the first angle of somebody being bowled needs to be front on, definitely front on, because you want to see what has happened. You want to see how much the ball moved, whether it drifted, whether it swung, whether the batsman's feet didn't move, why he was not in line, whether he played inside the line, outside the line. You can't see it from any other place other than front on. And if there is any other replay for a bowl other than front on, then I'm not very happy with proceedings. So yeah, I mean, there is that, and again, that's probably just me, and like you said, I may be in my head playing God, but it's more to do with, I think, where would you watch a game from? You would watch the game from right behind the bowler's arm at most points in time, and that is there is a reason why you would watch the game from behind the bowler's arm, because you get to see the most detail of what is happening. You go to a ground and you watch the game from point, or you watch the game from, say, extra cover. You don't see a thing. You don't even know whether the guy is bowled or not. If you watch it from behind the bowler's arm, you see a lot more. It's the same concept in cricket. I mean, you can do the art later. First, tell me why the guy was bowled, and then you can come back and do 30 different angles in ultra motion or super slow motion or whatever else you have. But first of all, tell me what happened, because I was eating my soup and I missed what happened. I want to see what happened now. So that's how it is.
So over the years, I mean, given that now you're saying that you would find it difficult to watch a match at the ground and you would watch it in the control room itself. I mean, given that, I mean, over the years, I'm sure it's likely that your understanding of this game and appreciation of the game has only been so much more enhanced by the views that you're getting, right? I mean, as Mahesh said, we all grew up in the era of, where sometimes the cameraman used to even miss where the ball went. And, and I'm not really making fun or anything like that. It is just the way it was back then. The coverage was that way. It was a very different time. But given that what we are seeing now, you're seeing the ultra slow-mo and the spin vision and the kind of dissection and analysis that not just professionals, but even, people who are watching are doing. There are users on Twitter and, just fans who are, pausing things and sort of analyzing what exactly is happening with each ball and how Kohli's stance is changing with each test and all that. That level of dissection is only possible because of the quality of the broadcast. And so has your understanding and appreciation of the game only increased because of that.
First of all, let's get to missing the ball. People still miss the ball a lot. And I've seen recent series where people should not be missing balls, but they do. And people in some of the best broadcasts in the world, and they would be even better broadcasts if they had people not missing the ball. The very fact that they have got so many cameras helps them a lot eventually. And the fact that they've got great commentators also helps them. But with us, we have very few tools. We have very few fallbacks. And so we have to make the best of what we have. What has happened, and you referred to Ajesh's podcast earlier. He talked about specialization and the amount of cricket that cameramen in India and South Africa have done in the recent past. There's a huge amount of cricket that happens in India, and for economic reasons and for the fact that English wages and Australian wages are too much for the broadcasts around the world to afford. We find that these two nationalities are employed largely around the world, so they do so much cricket that they are a lot more sort of prepared. They are a lot better at doing cricket than a lot of other people. I mean, there are some great professionals in other parts of the world as well. But as a general rule of thumb, I think Indian cameramen do the most cricket around the world, followed by South Africans. So, yeah, I mean, we had a few years back, we had an English cameraman who came to Gaul, and Gaul, if you're facing the fort, is the most difficult to follow because the red ball is more difficult to follow than the white ball, and the background of the fort, which is brown, and the cameramen watching in black and white viewfinders, they find it almost impossible to see the ball. And we found that on the first day there were, I think, 17 sixes hit. We didn't follow a single one. So then we had to change him and we had put somebody else up. But we now had a local Sri Lankan cameraman and a South African cameraman. We didn't miss a single 4 or 6. And this is how it is. I mean, practice makes perfect. Golf cameramen, for example, they're from other parts of the world and they don't miss a ball. Maybe if these guys were to do golf, they would miss that particular ball because everything has a rhythm. It's like driving. If you're driving in India, it's a different rhythm to driving in the US. And somebody from the US will find it impossible to drive in India and vice versa. It's not that easy. So there is a rhythm involved to everything. And we find that despite limited resources, you find all the ball being followed and stuff being done because there is a huge amount of quality in this part of the world, which earlier when I started, there was nothing. Everybody used to come from abroad. They taught people here, and people learned from the best. The cameramen who came then, they were brilliant. But then things evolved, and our guys got better and better and better and better. It's not rocket science. Practice makes perfect. You learn on the job. And yeah, I mean, I don't know whether I answered your actual question or not, but this is where we are. Whether we have developed to a point where there is immense amount of quality, which is why you find that broadcasts around the world, are getting better and better. Especially in this part of the world, they're getting better. The ads notwithstanding, we struggle because of the amount of ads we need to fill in. Whether surrogate or otherwise, we have to do a lot more stuff around the cricket, which is not there perhaps in England and Australia. They can do straight cricket, South Africa as well. Whereas we have to look at other things as well. We've got to make sure that the mid-wicket mats are visible. Whether this brand of sometimes the advertising behind the bowler is visible, the mats behind the bowler. Sometimes in Pakistan, you've got to show people drinking tea. All sorts of stuff. So we've got to cope with a lot of different things. But yeah, I think the overall quality of broadcasting around the world has definitely gone up, also because of the technology, as Ajesh also mentioned earlier. The technology has improved. The monitors are clearer. The cameras are 4K. Everything becomes a lot better. The viewfinders have become better. Everything plays a part.
So talking of missing the balls, one of the points I wanted to ask you about, let's take a specific example, right? In the second test, Dimit Karunaratne gets out caught at short leg. I think it was Abdullah Shafiq who took the catch. He was pretty much at the middle of the bat, and he takes it. And what amazed me about that shot is that the entire thing was caught. And on the first replay, I could see it. Like, I don't recall any match in which I saw that. Like, if you remember the Harbhajan hat-trick in Calcutta, the catch that Ramesh took, I still don't have a clear vision of that, right? It's one of those 50-50 decisions. We still don't have. And this was perfect, right? How much of that is skill? How much of that is chance? How would you describe such perfect capture?
Okay, so if you talk about Calcutta, and now it would be a little unfair because the resolution of the cameras, the frame rates of the cameras, everything has changed. But I agree that the camera work in this series was of a very, very high caliber. We got the right people, the right place. We have, to give you some sort of an example, we had in the Pakistan series, we had 3 super slow motion cameras and 1 ultra motion camera. Whereas, if you go around the world, you would have at least 6 or 7 ultra motion, 6 or 7 super slow motions, and a couple of ultra motions in a broadcast. So that's where we are as far as that is concerned. So you would invariably get something from somewhere. But here, of course, the skill is important, because if your mid-wicket cameraman does not catch it, then you don't have it anywhere, straight on. So this is something that goes with having the right personnel, doing the job. And we were lucky. The ultra motion pictures that you saw of the ball going through the air at, you could see the seam perfectly, landing on the seam, moving. That was due to the skill of the cameraman. He's perhaps the best in the world, in my opinion, the best in the world. And I use the ultra motion camera very differently because I have very few cameras. I have to use it as a live camera as well, which is why I put it in the position it was in, which was the reverse slip position. Generally, ultra motion cameras are fixed and they're never used as live cuts. But I was using it because I don't have enough cameras. So I've got to make the best use of it. And it is to the credit of the cameraman that he was able to offer me live shots as well as do this at the same time. And I was able to get some phenomenal pictures which haven't been seen before, and which you will now see more and more in other places because people have seen what can be done. So yeah, that's definitely, to answer your question, it is a lot to do with skill, but I would not compare it to Harbhajan then, because at that time the cameras were not that great. You're 24 frames a second. Right now we've got 300 frames a second up to 1,000 frames a second. So there is a huge amount of difference in frame rates, and even the resolution, 4K resolution versus SD resolution. There is absolutely no comparison. So I wouldn't go too far back, but in the recent times as well, I think that what we did was comparable to what you would see at most places.
Fair enough. Just a follow-up question. You mentioned a couple of times at least about the fact that you work with limited resources. Honestly speaking, just looking at the match, I mean, we watch matches from all around the world. In fact, I would argue that nothing stands out. Like, for instance, some of the recent coverage, I think it started with the first West Indies series during COVID that happened in Sri Lanka when West Indies came in or something. So, or probably a little earlier. That was the first time I saw Gaul in this sort of breathtaking beauty on TV. I've been to that ground. I absolutely love the ground. But usually I always find that the broadcast doesn't do justice to the ground. All of a sudden, I saw the ground in all its like resplendent beauty. In fact, now I find that TV watching is even better than being live. And so being limited in resources is the last thing that I would have expected to hear from you. Can you just touch a little more on that? What do you mean by limited resources? How does that, let's say, compare with what Australia has, what Sky Sports has in England, for instance?
I just told you that a normal telecast there would have six to seven super slow motions and a couple of ultra motions plus a spider cam perhaps. We don't have any of that. For the Pakistan series, we had 11-man cameras. Otherwise, I think if you were to go to England and Australia, you would probably have about 24, 25-man cameras at times. So there is a bit of difference. Also, the frame rates of the cameras matter. Again, like I said, we had only 3 super slow motions and 1 ultra motion. It's to get something out of that is you got to work a lot harder, because you got to make sure that you use every single ounce of your resources, and that's the beauty of it. You're talking about Gaul and its resplendent beauty. It's because we have this wonderful drone cameraman, a local lad, a young boy who doesn't even understand English, but he understands broadcasting. And I don't have to tell him much. Usually you have, for example, if you look at a drone in most parts of the world, a drone is operated by 2 people. One does the gimbal and one flies the drone. This guy flies the drone and operates the camera on his own. And I've never seen anybody who frames the drone for the graphics. I mean, he looks at the graphics as well and frames his shot accordingly. I just put up the shot as a challenge, and he does the rest. I mean, it's brilliant. Sometimes there was this one shot in I think against Bangladesh. It was a single shot in Palekele. There is this long staircase where the batsmen walk out of. So the guy started at the stumps, the umpires walking in, and he went off the stumps, went over the umpires, went to the batsman on the top. He went high above the batsman, and he followed them from the staircase coming down, went to the fielders, and then walked the batsman in. We named both batsmen. There was a single shot of about 2.5 minutes, and we did everything on the drone. I just let it run. And he went from there. He went high, and then he went low like a buggy, and went along the boundary line, and then I cut to the batsman close up, and I named the batsman. So yeah, I mean, it's just you have some wonderful talent, and you allow them to flourish. So when I was unable to do one series, he called me up and said, on one battery charge, I'm only getting 3 shots. so he has very few batteries, because he's working on a shoestring budget. He has very few batteries, so you have to make every battery count. So you might realize that sometimes, I would take shots which you might not always take. It might be slightly self-indulgent, but I thought the beauty of the place deserved it. And yeah, I didn't think it was forced. So I, when his battery is charged, I try and take as many shots, because it's important for somebody who's working hard to have validation. If somebody's offering a shot, and you're not going to take the shot, you just tell the guy, okay, I'm not going to take the shot, so he moves on. Lots of people don't tell the guys. The guy stays on, and then the shot is not taken, and the person is heartbroken. I know how I would feel. If I work very hard for something and it doesn't go on air, then I feel like I've been kicked in the gut. And it's the same for somebody else. So I have this great empathy, and also as a photographer myself, I find it very difficult to sort of avoid shooting beautiful frames. If there is a beautiful frame up there, I try and fit it in somehow or the other.
Yeah, I must link your website actually, where you post quite a few of your photos. It's quite stunning. I mean, really great job with the photography.
Thank you.
Yeah. Just a clarification on what you said earlier with the ultra slow-mo. By reverse slip, you mean like for a right-hander that would be leg slip? Is that what you mean? I mean, what is reverse slip?
So there are two slips. They are on so placed at long on, and it would be long on and third man, right? So
okay.
There are the two slips, and these other two slips, we just call them reverse slip because we already have two slips. So they would be at fine leg and long off. So that's the reverse slip. But the reverse slip cameras are usually the ones that are on super slow motion, and they have wheels. So they have, you get shots from behind the batsman. You get you get all these dynamic shots. It's a very tough camera to do, let me tell you, because it requires the cameraman to physically pull the camera, drag the camera every over. You can't stay there for the next over, because you would be in the batsman's eye line. So you got to move back. So it takes a hell of a lot out of that cameraman as well. So he physically drags the camera about 30-40 yards each over. To do that in goal is tough. So this is a lot of stuff that people don't understand, don't realize. You could do the camera just by keeping it there and not moving. There are a lot of people who are not, don't care enough to move that camera. But then you don't get the shots that you get. You'd still get some shots. You'd still get some really, really nice shots, but you won't get those shots. And this is what you mean. And if that guy's shots don't go on air, if there's some great shots and they don't go on air, then he won't feel like dragging his camera again, over and over for 90 overs in a day, or 98 overs in a day, in the extreme heat. 4 test matches in Gaul. I mean, it is really, really hot. It takes a hell of a lot out of a person, and one has to realize that, and one has to sometimes give those cameramen a little bit more extra to ensure that I would say their heart is not broken. They do that again and again and again and again, for 5 days at a stretch, and then go again after 3 days. So yeah, it is immense hard work, but the reward is the sort of pictures that you get, and the validation that one gets when people like you and others say that we enjoyed watching. And that's what we all want, for people to enjoy watching what we do, because we work very hard for that, and we take great pride and great joy in getting people to love our work.
Yeah, I mean, and ultimately, the love for the sport is enhanced by what you see. I mean, I can imagine, of course, love for the sport can come in various ways. You can play the sport, you can read about it, you can listen to it on commentary, radio and all that. But, the moment you see such quality coverage that is melding both the game as well as the setting, and, making sure that, the story of the game is told so well, you begin to love that sport even more. And that particular match begins to take on that, that extra bit of magic. You remember matches like that much more also. Does the ball also make a huge difference? The red ball and the white ball. Now, of course, you have the pink ball as well for day-night test. But, talk a bit about that and how that affects the quality of the footage and the challenges that come through with it?
There are different issues. The red ball is more difficult to follow. The white ball is easier because you have dark skies, for example. You have it's not that varied. It's a lot easier under lights to follow a white ball, even during the day. A red ball is a challenge. A red ball at goal is the biggest challenge, especially with if you're covering it from the near end with the fort and the background, because of the brownness of the fort, which and the ball and the fort merge into each other. It's really tough. There is that, but daylight is very good for cameras under lights, because the depth of field becomes much shallower. It's much easier to lose focus. The margins become wafer thin, and in daylight there's a little bit more sort of leeway as far as that is concerned. Frame rates need to drop because the aperture, you've got to open the aperture up at night, so frame rates have to drop, otherwise the picture becomes darker. The lenses eat light. So in the day it's a lot easier to cover during the day, but it's easier to follow the ball at night when there's a white ball. So there are sort of pros and cons either way.
And in terms of the ground, I mean, you have mentioned Gaul and how challenging it is with the fort and things. And as a director, how important is it to understand each ground, its geography, the topography, the angles? And I'm sure going there again and again will only make you a little better because you would have had the experiences. And, talk a bit about going to a ground afresh, as opposed to, say, going to a place like, where you have gone 5-10 times before. How does all that make a difference?
Honestly, to a director, it makes very little difference, because a director needs to work on things, which are in front of him or her. It's more to do with the camera people. They need to be well versed with a lot of different things, and a director basically needs to be able to think on his feet. Things happen in live broadcasts that sort of you would never expect. Like, for example, I was doing the Women's World Cup semi-final, which is another story. I mean, I was supposed to be on holiday, but I was called back because somebody else got COVID, and I was doing that game with a new crew. I'd never worked with them before in Wellington, as soon as we got to start of play, basically just before the anthem's world feed, all my monitors went down except the one broadcast monitor. Everything else went down, and we were supposed to go to the anthems. Everybody was panicking. I knew only 2 people from my camera crew. I had never worked with any of them before, any others. But I just, while everybody else was panicking, I just said, guys, just keep silent. Let me handle this. And I told the cameraman, just tell me what shots you have, and hold the shot. I will say stand by, and I will wait for a second. So if you're moving around, just stop, and I will cut you because I can't see you. You've got to make sure that you're there. And I don't think anybody in the world would have realized that semi-final in Wellington, I think it was Australia versus the West Indies. Nobody would have realized that for the first 10 minutes of it, I had no pictures. I was going about it absolutely blind. I could only see what was going on air, nothing else. And so I mean, these are the sort of things that directors need to worry about. People like rehearsing. I heard Ajesh talking about a lot of rehearsals as well. But I think I am, as Ajesh mentioned, the other kind of person who is more an on-the-fly kind of person, because I've learned that however much you prepare in live broadcasting, things have a habit of going the other way. So other than presentations and stuff, I don't believe in a huge amount of preparation. I mentally think about things beforehand, but rehearsing, I think, sometimes deadens a lot of things. It's good for the anchors to rehearse and maybe look at a couple of angles, but not too much of it, because I think it takes away from the spontaneity. Again, there are different thought processes on it, and different kinds of people. And what I do might not be ideal for most people, but I personally think it works for me.
So in terms of, suppose you have a test in Gaul, the position of the cameraman and all that, is it entirely their call? I mean, obviously the producer and the director have a say in that, right? Like where angles you're thinking of, the overall sort of macro picture of the coverage.
The positions are already mapped out. You have you obviously do a recce of the ground beforehand, and in places where you haven't where you have worked regularly, you know exactly where people are going to be. There are camera gantries built, so you can't go. Most of the positions in cricket are mapped out for everywhere. I mean, there's a wicket to wicket which is right behind the bowler's arm. There's a ball follow which is as close to right behind the bowler's arm as possible on either side. There's a spin vision which is on the other side. Of the ball follow camera is on the right. The spin vision will be on the left of the wicket to wicket camera. So they're close together. After that, there are the slips. Slips have they mark a certain amount of steps. And then they take their position. They make sure they try to see that they're not in each other's shot when they look. But players have a habit of standing right in front of the camera, like Angelo Matthews was doing right throughout this Test series. So they have got to move. So sometimes you see the other camera in shot. The reverse slip cameras, like I told you, they drag their camera and move, depending upon whether a left-hander or a right-hander is batting, whether a left-arm bowler or a right-arm bowler is bowling, whether a spinner is bowling or a seamer is bowling. They change their position. A mid-wicket camera has its own gantry. It's right there. A reverse mid-wicket camera has its own position. If there's a high 45 camera, it has a position mapped out. In Gaul, there is no place to put a high 45 camera, so it's not there. A drone flies about everywhere. So positions are generally mapped out. If you're looking at specifically a new position, then you might have to go and have a look. But other than that, like I told you, we've got 11 or 12 man cameras, so we try and maximize them. Because there was no crowd, my handheld cameraman, I put him at the other reverse slip because I didn't have a reverse slip. I asked him, even though he had a small lens, he did the best he could, because again, we've got to make the best of whatever resources we have. So we try and make 11 cameras look like 12 or 13 or 14 or 15. That's what we try and do.
I want to come to this particular series as well, because these were both the Australia series and the Pakistan series. I mean, they were very unique in a way, in the matter of timing in which they were played. So when you were thinking of going to Sri Lanka and covering it, did you have any inkling of how, what were your thoughts on it? Because you obviously, even then, the situation was there was the economic turmoil going on, and there was like a hint of the political situation to come. So yeah, talk a bit about your mindset of actually going to, when you went to Sri Lanka, what was it? Did you think at all about what it could turn into, or were you just like, okay, I'm going to do my job and that's about it?
Yeah, when we were supposed to go, I was pretty sure it would be called off. I didn't think, I was reading the stories just like you were reading the stories, and I was thinking there's no way that the series was going to go ahead. But yeah, I mean, eventually we were on the flight, and I was thinking it could be called off at any time. I'd packed a lot of food. I thought there would be no food available. We're reading lots and lots of different stories. There's no fuel, no food. People are being asked to grow their own food in their backyard and stuff like that. When we reached there, we found the Sri Lankan people to be a very unfortunate word, but resilient, because there is no other word for it. We found we had no issues with food. Food was available. I walk a lot, so I had no problem with with transport and stuff. We were initially in Colombo, so yeah, I mean, walking was not an issue. I was walking, but you could find tuk-tuks if you waited long enough. People were waiting in line just below our hotel. There was a fuel pump, and we would see long lines, 2-3 kilometers long of people waiting with the cars for fuel. But they were so orderly because you had two separate lines, one line for diesel, one line for petrol. They would leave space in between, for the lanes for people to pass. They would not park in driveways. It was just unbelievable. People sitting, making a picnic out of it, and it was really, really social. Then people would go back home. They would leave their keys with one person. One person would stay overnight and move 10 cars, and then the next person would come, and the first person would go home. So they managed, and it was immense to see. We passed the site where the protests, which was a protest site, and it was largely a peaceful site with lots of banners and people singing and dancing and all sorts of stuff. So this was before things turned further south. But yeah, we at no point did we feel threatened. In fact, we were always welcomed. Even on the day there were these huge protests. There were protests outside the ground, which were about 25 feet from where we were, about maybe 30 feet from where we were, from where the Australian dressing room was. But nobody threatened the cricket. Nobody had any issues with the cricket. All they wanted was for their country and for their own people. They had no issues with people coming here and playing. In fact, they were very grateful for people to be coming there, people to be touring there. None of the tourists were harmed. They pulled out all stops for the tourists. In fact, I tweeted as well. It's a great place to come there. People, the Sri Lankan people need you, and it was not just that. It's also a great time to go there. I mean, not that particular time, where there was a little bit of violence. The pictures looked very, very dramatic, but I know people who were in the Cinnamon hotel, which was right there, and nobody was threatened. People are still welcoming. There are still tourists coming from Europe and other places, and even from India. It's the situation is not as bad as it seems from the outside. Like I said, when I read about it, I thought there would be no food. There was no problem at all. I mean, it's a great bargain to go there at the moment, I've been called a tourism ambassador for Sri Lanka, but I really love the place. I think it's one of the most beautiful places in the world, and with some of the most wonderful people as well. I can't think of another place where people would be, still smiling after what they've been going through. It's just unbelievable.
So there's a reality of the fact that things are normal. Whatever you expected didn't turn out that way. People are largely peaceful. Even the protests were largely peaceful and so on, and you felt safe. But there's also the perception that you have about. I mean, there are not enough precedences, right? It's not like every day that a president is fleeing the country and then people are trying to overthrow a government or whatever. So you have very few precedences, and most of them are ugly and bad. So naturally, even if the reality is that there's a perception that is like, it could get worse. And especially if they announce an emergency, then you're like, okay, can I even get out of this country? One is through the course. I mean, you mentioned how you felt when you went in there for the Australia series, but things got worse from then towards the Pakistan series. One, how did you manage the sort of dynamic situation? Was there at any point of time you thought, oh my God, I should just take the first flight back home and go, right? Or you were hoping that they cancel the series or whatever. That's one thing. Also, did you have other team members who were worried, right? I mean, you might have a different perception of the situation, but there might be other people in sort of caught in a different life situation and so on. Did anybody come to you and say, okay, if I get the first flight back home, can you send me?
No, nobody. Actually, people back home were calling and saying, what's happening? It's a dangerous situation. And I said, no, people are singing and dancing. It's not dangerous. Nobody's throwing stones. Nobody's burning anything. They're outside the ground. They're chanting their slogans. They've got their megaphones. And it's like, it's like a democratic protest with no loss of life, with no loss of property, nothing whatsoever. At least in Gaul. In Colombo, things were different. I wasn't in Colombo, but not one person felt threatened. They gave us on that particular day. They gave us an escort, but again, that was not required. Even the protesters said, "We'll clear the road for you. You just go. After that, we'll go back to it." So, I mean, it was a very civilized sort of atmosphere. And even on the day of the protest, they had banners thanking people for coming. So, no, to answer your question, at no point did anybody from the crew feel threatened or feel like going back at all.
But the other interesting thing about this situation, which I want to bring up, is that, traditionally, cricket and politics have been on parallel paths, and, the politics is happening on the side, but cricket generally tends to just follow its own course. And even in situations where, we've had cases where the IPL was going on when India was going through this, massive tragedy of the second wave, but it so happened that the cricket didn't really get into it. But in Sri Lanka, what is very interesting is that the former cricketers have made such a big sort of news around these protests itself. I mean, people like Roshan Mahanama, Mahela, Sangha, all of them, they've been vocal, they've been very things. So what is happening is that the cricket has the politics has seeped into the cricket. I mean, whether you like it or not. And of course, on the broadcast and things, you have to cover the cricket. You may not mention it, but there has been like this confluence of cricket and the politics and economics. Did you notice that? I mean, I'm asking this as a personal opinion, not necessarily as, did you also feel that there was a bit of meshing happening?
So, yeah, politics and sport generally get together, but also because cricketers are so famous. A lot of them are also politicians. People like Arjuna. They're into
Anat. Yeah.
So I mean, there is Sanat is there as well. So there are those things as well. But yeah, eventually I think it was more than politics. It was the economic situation. I think everywhere you can't. Generally you can. It's a small part, microcosm of life. It's not really the main thing. But here, no fuel, people struggling for a lot of, no gas. A lot of restaurants were closed because there was no gas. Stuff like that. People, long lines for cooking gas. You don't have cooking gas. You got to manage that sort of stuff. So it affected everybody.
Sure. I wanted to ask you about the series before the test, though, the Australia One Day and T20 series. That was quite a surreal experience to watch, actually, because we all were following the news of what was happening in Sri Lanka, but then you have these packed stadiums where people are so, it was so clear that they're passionate about their team, and then you had this series where Sri Lanka started doing well also. Start some sensational finishes, and the crowd was really coming to life. How was it like, watching that series? I mean, it is of course a thrilling one day and T20 series, but there's also that additional layer of the fact that the country is going through so much, and yet you have thousands and thousands of people coming to the stadium and, taking part in this spectacle.
That was actually unbelievable for us. And that there was, again, some people raised the moral aspect of it there as well. But I think that it was, it was one case where sport sort of joined people together. I think it bound people together, and I've never seen such crowds in Sri Lanka. The crowds were so sporting. There were even the Australians felt that it was phenomenal. The amount of passion there was, the amount of emotions there was, the shots that you must have seen of kids crying, of people celebrating in joy. I mean, it was unbelievable, and like, again, to capture all that with the amount of cameras that we had, and it is a credit to the crew, to my replay operators who found the right shots, and who created those packages as well. It was mind blowing. It was surreal. It was like my producer remarked that it's like we're in a bubble again. It's like we are removed from the reality. We are in a world where everything is right. We're removed from all the troubles, and actually the entire tour was like that. While we could see the issues and everything, it was like a bubble for us. It was like a COVID bubble. We were protected from the outside world to a huge extent, and even the outside world sort of colluded with us to protect us from everything else that was going on. And for that, I need to thank the Sri Lankan people as well. I mean, it sounds like a sort of political speech or something, but really, I mean, I have said this before, and I say it again. Nobody else in the world could have done what they did. I don't think in India or in Pakistan or England or the Caribbean or anywhere, people would have, like you said, come out in droves without fuel, walked miles and miles, taken public transport, however they could come. I mean, to see young kids coming out, it was just unbelievable. I think this tour will be the best. After I hang up my boots, I think I will look back on this tour as perhaps the one tour that I will never be able to forget. The quality of cricket, the results. Sri Lanka won exactly the amount of games that they lost. Against two very, very good teams. Australia, a fantastic team. Pakistan, I think on the up, some top players, and Sri Lanka, they just found another gear from somewhere. I don't know how they found that. We have 4 test matches in Gaul on the bounce, a venue like that, to put out 4 test matches with 4 pitches totally different from each other. There were not mirror images of each other at all. Every pitch behaved differently. It was just unbelievable. The pitches in Pallekele, in Colombo, sensational. I mean, I wish that they had not cancelled the one-days that they planned with Pakistan. I mean, we would have had more great cricket in store. Yes, the situation is not great, and I hope they sort of turn it around very soon, because the people deserve better, and the people deserve as much joy as they can get in life, and I think cricket this time was something that really provided them with the joy that was missing, with something to get behind, because obviously I think as far as politics was concerned, they had found that the politicians had let them down. The cricketers didn't let them down. I mean, they found something to keep the morale of the whole country alive.
2 points. One is that I will link a podcast I had done with Telford Weiss and Firdaus Munda on the politics and cricket in South Africa. Very enlightening. And they had extremely, again, nuanced thoughts on how, cricket cannot get away from politics there, but at the same time, it is not as black and white as we believe. I mean, pun intended, as black and white as we believe, because there is so much else that happens behind the scenes, and with the board and the quotas and everything else. Anyway, I will link that. And secondly, we spoke a lot about Gaul and the 4 tests there. We did a podcast with Fidel Fernando a few years ago, and all of us at 81 All Out, long-time listeners will know, have unanimously agreed that Galle is the home of cricket. Don't believe that there is any other ground that is the home of cricket. Galle is the place to watch cricket, especially Test cricket. And recently they announced that the next two World Test Championship finals is going to be at Lord's. This is an outrage. I mean, Galle should get that final every time, every single cycle that there is. So let me wrap up by asking you, these 4 tests, you mentioned how this tour will live with you for a long time, but is there any particular moment or any particular passage that, you can pick out as being your favorite in these 4 tests? It could even be in the one days and T20s. I mean, in this tour, anything that, absolutely stands out among all the standout moments?
Well, that Dasun Chanaka knock that changed the course of that game and gave Sri Lanka belief. I think that turned around a lot of things. You just had to see the emotion in the crowd. You just had to see, how much it meant to the people. That one knock changed the mood of a nation. It was they were thinking that they were in for another battering at the hands of the Australians, but suddenly things changed and they turned things around. So that was definitely one. And then it was like I mentioned, the emergence of Prabhat Jayasuriya. That was I saw a tweet from Rex Clementine before the test match saying that, okay, Prabhat Jayasuriya likely to play, and not surprisingly, he comes from SSC, which implied that perhaps, he's not the right man for the job. But eventually even Rex turned around and was singing praises of him. So yeah, I mean, not too many people expected this man to come in. He came in only because Jai Vikrama got COVID and Embul Denia was terribly out of form, and he just changed everything. Without him, Mendes was bowling terribly. They just didn't have a bowler, and he single-handedly kept them in the hunt. He bowled like he was their plan A. If that failed, he was their plan B, and if that failed, he was their plan C. They had no other plans, and he just kept on bowling, and yeah, his arm didn't fall off. It was a wonder, and he bowled them to victory finally in both the test matches that they won, and that was a phenomenal selection. Very lucky. Everything was in the stars. I think it's just somebody up above saying that, you guys deserve some luck. So here's Prabhat Jayasuriya for you.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, it's still ringing in my ears, Dikwela from the, behind the stumps saying, Papa, Niyamagana, and all that. That Dikwela just keeps talking all the time, it's like still ringing in my head through the series. So fantastic, Hemant. Thank you so much for joining. Thank you for your extremely, insightful thoughts and well-considered thoughts. And it's been a real pleasure to have you on.
Thank you guys so much. Yeah, it's been a pleasure talking to you guys as well. It's great fun. Thank you.
We would love to have you back again. I'm sure there are so many aspects of cricket and coverage that we can still talk about. And hopefully in the future, we would love to have you back on the show.
Thank you. Hope it was not too boring. Let's see.
Not at all. Most interesting.
There's a beer in my hand. That's about it.
And to our listeners, thank you. A reminder about Mike Coward's Cricket Beyond the Bazaar, which we republished. I will put all the links. You can pick up the book. It's a fascinating read. And also subscribe to our podcast, review us, rate us. It will help more people find. 81 All Out is our website. At 81 All Out is our Twitter handle. And spread the word.
India have won the series.
They're going to get back for 2. India